Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may need. This bill purports to protect free speech from government censorship. And I agree, it's a great idea. It's such a good idea, in fact, that the Founding Fathers put it in the Constitution. It's called the First Amendment. We don't need a new bill to protect free speech because that is currently the law of the land. So we must ask ourselves, what is the point of this bill? As our esteemed ranking member observed last night, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping probably don't make a habit of watching congressional proceedings. But we're willing to bet that this floor debate is of keen interest to Russian and Chinese agents bent on destabilizing our democracy and influencing our elections to serve their interests. H.R. 140 would effectively allow these and other foreign malign actors who have poured hundreds of millions of dollars into online propaganda to create chaos, mistrust, hate, and confusion for Americans to continue using social media platforms unfettered to wreak havoc on our democratic institutions, including the integrity of our elections. It would do so by undermining the only defense that we have against these operations, which is the ability of our national security, intelligence, and law enforcement agencies to warn social media platforms about the public about the deployment of counterfeit accounts, disinformation, and cyber surveillance by malign actors. Now, I have no doubt that my Republican colleagues will claim that, of course, all of our national security apparatus is able to warn social media companies of foreign interference. But the way that this bill is written is that they would have to wait, even if that's the case, which it's not, they would have to wait 72 hours in order to do that. 72 hours on the internet is a lifetime. Everything that they would want to accomplish would be accomplished within 72 hours. Now, there are exceptions to that, and so clearly my Republican colleagues recognize that there need to be exceptions, but those exceptions cover a very, very narrow window, a narrow scope of child pornography, human or drug trafficking, or the dissemination of classified information. So anything else that might not be lawful speech still has to wait 72 hours, far too long. Now, Democrats acted in good faith to identify and correct these dangerous loopholes in our committee, but all of our amendments were voted down. Our Democratic and Republican colleagues attempted again to address the most dangerous flaws of this bill by submitting 64 amendments for floor consideration. But Republicans only allowed 10 to be considered here today, and of those, only one was offered by a Democrat. So much for all the open floor rules that our Republicans have talked about. Now, in fairness, Republicans accepted multiple minor amendments that were submitted late and yet still rejected many of the timely amendments. Now, some of those Democratic amendments would have cured the obvious weaknesses and loopholes of this unnecessary bill. There was one amendment that would allow our intelligence community, national security apparatus, and law enforcement to inform social media companies of national security threats. Another would allow them to inform the social media companies in order to combat domestic and international terrorism. Another would have addressed fraud targeting seniors. Another would have ensured the safety of children online, preventing attacks on the U.S. Capitol. One even would have prevented the incitement of violence by neo-Nazis and other hate groups. They were all voted down. They even blocked a bipartisan amendment offered by Congresswoman Houlihan and Congresswoman Mace to ensure that law enforcement can still act immediately to prevent sexual assault. By rejecting these common sense amendments, Republicans have made it clear that this bill is not about protecting the rights and safety of all Americans. In fact, even though there is no evidence, and I'll get to that in a minute, that warrants this bill, there's plenty of evidence that Russia interfered in our elections in 2016. Now, what this bill does is it welcomes the same kind of election interference that we know Russia did in 2016 and that they continue to do today. Just like Donald Trump sided with Vladimir Putin over our intelligence communities in Helsinki in 2018, this bill and the Republicans who are sponsoring this bill are siding with Russia and Vladimir Putin over our national security apparatus and our law enforcement. My Republican colleagues claim that they've put this bill forward because the FBI somehow colluded with Twitter to suppress the New York Post article on the Hunter Biden laptop story for all of 24 hours, 3 weeks before the presidential election. A private business decision based on the best information available at the time, and which had absolutely no discernible impact on the availability of the article nor the outcome of the election. The chairman of this committee just said that, referenced a hearing that we had where there were hours of testimony about censorship. Well, the only testimony I witnessed about censorship was former President Trump trying to take down tweets that he did not like on Twitter. There was no evidence, none at all, that the FBI or any other law enforcement agencies directed Twitter to take down any unlawful speech, and that includes the Hunter Biden laptop story. Now, we can spend some time, we don't need to, on why that story was both highly suspicious and also glaringly false, but the broader point is that this is a bill that seeks a solution where there is no problem. There is no protected speech that has been prohibited by the federal government, and there's no actual evidence of any censorship under the First Amendment. So we're basically trying to change the law to redefine censorship. And in doing so, we would be opening up the floodgates to allow for all sorts of unprotected speech to be distributed throughout our social media world online, because the government officials who are charged with making sure that our laws are not violated, that crimes are not committed, will be handcuffed and unable to do their jobs for fear that they will be fined thousands of dollars if they are wrong. I urge all my colleagues to stand with free speech and American democracy and oppose this dangerous bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.